Hey everyone, how's it going? Forrest here, again with another installment of my complete analysis of all of Bach's chorale harmonizations. Today we're looking at Wohl dem, der sich auf seinen Gott, which translates to Happy the man who on his God. It's a relatively short chorale today. We're just going to hop right into the analysis. So 4 sharps in the key signature. We start on E major, we end on E major. I reckon we're in the key of A major. We have a couple of passing tones, one in the melody and one in the tenor, before we get E, B, E, and G sharp. That's another E major triad. No need to reanalyze. We then have F sharp, A, E, and A. I reckon this E is a 7/6 suspension over the bass, and this D sharp is our chord tone, making this a D sharp diminished triad in first inversion, which is 7/6. And then we get G sharp, E, and B, completing our 1-7-6, 1-6 progression. It's a pretty normal progression in Bach's music, or more specifically the chorales. We then have C sharp, G sharp, E, and B. That's C sharp minor 7, which is 6/7. We then have D sharp, F sharp, B, and A. That's B7 over D sharp, which is 5/6/5. We have E, G sharp, B, and G sharp with a couple of passing tones in the inner voices. This would be an E major triad in root position before our half cadence is concluded with the B major triad, B, B, D sharp, and F sharp, our 5 chord. We have a little bit of a passing chord here as well. We have E, A, C sharp, and G sharp. That's like an A major 7 chord. We would expect 4 to go to 5. This 4 chord, or 4/7 chord more specifically, is in second inversion, so might as well mark it. It's a normative progression. Alright, our next phrase is in the key of B major. It ends in a perfect authentic cadence, and I think this reiterated B major triad takes us right into B major. B, D sharp, F sharp, and B. It is our 5 in the key of E and our tonic in the key of B. We then have A sharp, C sharp, F sharp, and C sharp. That is F sharp major in first inversion, which is 5/6. And then we get an interesting chord. We have G sharp, A sharp, F sharp, and D sharp. I reckon this G sharp's an accented non-chord tone. This is actually F sharp, A sharp, F sharp, and D sharp, which is D sharp minor over F sharp, which would be our 3 chord in first inversion in the key of B minor. Kind of an interesting progression, 5 going to 3. We don't see that very often. It's a deceptive progression, the same way as 5 going to 6 would be a dominant triad going to some type of tonic functioning triad, a stable chord. We then have G sharp, B, E, and E. That is E major over G sharp. E is now our 4 chord, 4/6 more specifically. We have a passing tone in the alto before we get F sharp, B, G sharp, and D. And this is an interesting chord here because F sharp, B, G sharp, and D, that would be like a 6 chord, like a 6/4/2. If we look at it technically speaking, we could say 6/4/2. However, I'm kind of the mindset that this D is, well, maybe not this D is an accented non-chord tone, but I think this F sharp is an accented non-chord tone. This is actually just E, B, G sharp, and D. So I think that this is just taking the chord and putting it in root position. But when that D happens, we also get C sharp. So I think this C sharp's also a non-chord tone. I'm more of the inclination to think that the E major is carrying over, so I'm going to call this a 7/5/3 chord in root position. Just say that the C sharp is preparing a suspension, or just not necessarily a suspension, but a tone that gets held for a longer part of the measure into the next beat. So 6/4/2 or 7/4/3, I think they're both accurate analyses. We then have F sharp, B, F sharp, and C. This B major, or this B natural, is a 4/3 suspension over the bass. We know that F sharp major is being implied here. We get the resolution on the next beat. We get a delayed 7th, and then we cadence on B major, which is our tonic. And it also takes us back to the key of E major, preparing us for the beginning of the A section after the repeat, and the B section after the repeat, the second time. Alright, so looking ahead, we have a phrase that ends in a half cadence in the key of E major. So this entire phrase is in E major. We start off with E, G sharp, E, and B, which is our tonic triad. Passing tone in the bass, passing tone in the alto before we get C sharp, G, and E. That's C sharp minor in root position, which is 6. and then we get F sharp, C sharp, A, and D. That is D sharp minor 7 flat 5 over F sharp, which would be a 7 chord with the degree symbol in first inversions, so that would be 6/5. 6 often does go to 7. Some adjacent harmony, as I've been calling it. We have a series of non-chord tones here in the lower three voices. We get G sharp, B, B. We would almost be thinking that we were getting ready for an E major triad here, but no, we get D sharp in the melody, which would complete this triad as a 3 chord, and that's fine because 7 wants to go to 3. It's fulfilling the cycle of falling fifths at this point. The 7 going to 3. 3 is a fifth below 7, therefore it wants to go there. It's like the path of least resistance. And then we get A, E, and C sharp. Notice how our 3 chords are going to 4 pretty consistently in this chorale, this A major. We then have B, A, F sharp, D, A, F sharp, and B. That's B7 over D sharp, which is 5/6/5. And then we get a couple more non-chord tones going on in the lower 3 voices. We have E sharp, G sharp, G sharp, and B. As E sharp diminished, so this is a secondary leading tone chord. E sharp is the leading tone to F sharp, which is our 2. So this would be a 7 of 2 chord. We then get F sharp, A, C sharp, and A. 5 going to 2 is a transitive progression. We would expect 5 to go to 1 and 2 to go to 5, but if the voice leading can take 2 to 5, 5 can also go to 2, so it goes against that grain of falling fifths, which tends to dictate the majority of the normal progressions we see in tonal music, especially the music of Bach's time. At least one outlook in terms of the flow of dominant to tonic through the whole diatonic scale, major or minor. But this chord in particular is very interesting because if we redacted the beginning of or just the chorale up until this point, and we looked at this chord and I said, well, we're in the key of E major, we have a chord where one of the voices has a passing tone. We have D sharp versus C sharp. Now, typically speaking, if this chord was not preceded by its secondary dominant, or I guess secondary leading tone chord, it's functioning as a dominant, I would analyze this as 7/6. I would analyze this chord as a D sharp diminished because typically this chord would be followed by an E major chord, either an E major chord or an E major chord in first inversion, and that is exactly what's happening here. We have G sharp, B, E, and G sharp, and in a couple of chorales recently, as well as some chorales in the past, we've seen this interesting 2 or 7/6 chord tonicized by its dominant. So this chord is definitely getting some accent or getting some emphasis as an F sharp minor chord, but the fact that I've analyzed this chord as 7/6 in the past, it's just an argument suggesting that maybe this is a subdivision of the harmonic rhythm and this is actually 2 going to 7. I don't think that's a very strong progression. When you have 2 chords that are a third away from one another, it's like you're going from one chord to the same chord because 2/3 of the chord are in common with one another. That's just the byproduct of harmony that is organized in thirds, right? If you go up the scale in thirds, you're going to encounter more notes in common than if you were to go adjacent to an adjacent chord or to a chord that's beyond a third away. So I think that this is something cheeky that Bach is doing. Like when we look at this progression here where we have, or I think we have another one in here. Is this the only one? Well, this is not a great example of it, but typically when we run into these, I think there's more of an argument for them to be 7/6 chords, but Bach preceding it by a secondary dominant is an interesting commentary because I think he's aware of the fact that at the end of this beat, the chord has a dominant function, but at the beginning, it's anyone's guess. I'm of the school of thought that it takes more than one voice to subdivide the harmonic rhythm, but the chord morphs from one into another across the beat. So I don't think there's a progression happening, but I think there is a morphing. So maybe I'm saying the same thing twice, but that's just the relationship that I've formed with the harmony. But regardless, we precede this B major triad with A sharp and C sharp in the bass. That is A sharp, C sharp, E, and G sharp, which is A sharp minor 7 flat 5 in root position, which would be 7 half diminished 7 of 5. And then we follow it up with a 5 chord B, D sharp, and F sharp, B major. And our last phrase is in the key of E major again. It ends in a perfect authentic cadence, and we get a bit of a deceptive progression here. We go from 5 to 3 again, just like how we had earlier here. We have G sharp, D sharp, G sharp, and B with a passing 7th here in the alto. This is G sharp minor in root position, our 3 chord like I just said. And 3 has been going to 4 pretty regularly like it does here as well. C sharp, E, and A, which is A major in first inversion, or 4-6. And typically when we have a 4-6 chord, there is a leading tone that connects it to our tonic when the tonic is the chord on the other side, which it happens to be in this case. We get a leading tone connector. It's never that skip of a third in the bass, or at least I can't recall a chorale where we've had a skip of a third in the bass with a 4-6 chord going to a 1 chord. There's always the leading tone, and sometimes we get a fully voiced 7th chord if one of the other voices changes as well. But we get E, B, E, and G sharp. That's our tonic triad, E major. We then have A, C sharp, E, and F sharp. That's F sharp minor 7 over A, which is 2-6-5. We know that Bach loves 2-6-5 chords. And then we have 4 eighth notes happening off of the harmonic rhythm. This typically means that the chord progression, or the harmonic rhythm's being subdivided. We have B, B, D, and G sharp. Or sorry, B, B, D sharp, and G sharp. Very interesting. We would expect 2-6-5 to go to 5, but here we have going to 3-6. So we're getting some adjacent harmony here, chords that are next to one another in the major scale, or I guess in whatever scale. They're just adjacent scale degrees. The roots are adjacent to one another. And closing in on our cadence, we have C sharp, A, E, and A. That's A major and C sharp, A major over C sharp, which is 4-6. Notice how our 3 chords have pretty much always gone to 4. Sometimes we see 3 go to 4. Actually, the majority of the time I think we see 3 go to 4. Sometimes we see it go to 7 or to 5, but most of the time we see it go to 4, and this chorale is a testament to that observation. We then have B, D, E, or sorry, I'm reading my clefs wrong, B, B, E, and G sharp. That's E major over B, which is 1-6-4, a chord that we often encounter in cadential situations, with a neighbor tone in the bass before we get B, B, D sharp, and F sharp. Typically the accessory to 1-6-4 is 5. We have a delayed 7th here. Sometimes we also use this bracket to indicate the relationship between 1-6-4 and 5. I don't see it fully necessary, but some textbooks will teach you this way. And then we cadence on E major, E, G sharp, B, and E, which is our tonic triad at root position, finishing off our chorale for today. So pretty forward analysis. It's interesting coming across these tonicized, it feels like a tonicized diminished chord, even though Bach does it in a roundabout way. You know, Bach is very crafty. He's a craftsperson and very innovative. And there's a lot of ingenuity in the way that he crafts the chorales and all of his music, really. So it wouldn't surprise me if Bach was actually making a commentary with this chord progression where he in a roundabout way tonicizes the 7th by tonicizing the 2 and then turning it into 7. If he was just tonicizing 2, why would that D sharp be there? I guess it's kind of the same reason why a 4-6 chord never sees it connected to a tonic without the leading tone. The alto does the same thing, but when the chord's in root position, that burden isn't there. He goes out of his way to contextualize the chord differently in another voice, and I think that that's fascinating. So whether we analyze it as 7-6 or whether we analyze it as 2 or whether we analyze it as both, I think they're both valid analyses, or however you go about looking at it is valid, and I think it's a fascinating chord progression, or not really a chord progression, but a fascinating instance in the chorale from a harmonic perspective overall. But regardless, that's today's analysis. If you're interested in following me along on this journey to analyze all of the chorale harmonizations, feel free to subscribe to the channel. Feel free to hit the notification icon. I upload once a day, so you'll be notified of when I upload. And if you want your daily dose of Bach or your daily dose of analysis, or both, you're in the right place. But that being said, thank you so much for watching the video. Thank you so much for supporting the channel by doing so. I look forward to tomorrow's analysis, and I hope you take care.